will follow.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Trinity Talk Live, water cooler conversations from a Christian perspective. I am Ken Coughlan, and today I am joined by two new guests. Let me introduce them. What do you say? Our first guest over here, seated to my right, is Rachel Derwart. Hello, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm good.
Rachel is 15 years old. She is going into her sophomore year at Harford Christian School. She enjoys playing music and participates in the music ministry here at Trinity, where she and her family have been attending for the past 7 years. Thank you very much for coming, Rachel.
Thanks for having me.
And over here is Sarah Coughlan. Sounds kind of familiar. Sarah is about to enter her sophomore year. See, I've already gotten the teenager eye roll, and we haven't even finished the introductions yet. Check that out. Sarah's about to start her sophomore year at Havre de Grace High School here in Harford County, Maryland. She is an actor in theater and film with, as of this past weekend, 44 acting credits on her resume. She is hoping, when she gets older, to actually be a voice actress, and she is related to someone else at the table. Thank you very much, Sarah, for coming.
Thank you for having me.
She's so polite. So, all right, tell you what, we're going to go ahead and launch into our current event segment today. Our first current event today comes from the Christian Post. The Christian Post has released an exclusive clip of a new movie that's coming out in September, on September 15th, called Because of Grácia. The clip shows the lead character, Chase, reading a poem in front of his class, his high school class, revealing to them his Christian faith for the first time. As tears roll down his face, he says, "See, I believe Jesus is the greatest man who ever lived, because when my depression was choking me, Gandhi wasn't the one to show me love. When I was drowning in my own imperfections, it was Jesus that brought me up out of that pit." According to the film's synopsis, Because of Grácia follows the intertwining lives of two couples who explore dating and friendship along dissimilar lines, leading to courage and transformation for one teen and personal crisis for the other. The film touches on the various serious topics of abortion, teen pregnancy, and the evolution debate, which oftentimes take place in a public school. And again, that comes out on September 15th. Our second story, if you are a teenage girl who likes magazines, but you're put off by the increasing tendency of titles like Cosmopolitan and Teen Vogue to applaud the inappropriate, then Focus on the Family may have something for you. This past May, they relaunched Brio, a Christian teen magazine that shut down back in 2009. Sorcha Brophy, a sociologist at the University of Pittsburgh, who grew up reading Brio, said that the magazine aims to normalize being a Christian teen by telling readers it can be cool to go to church and to shun drugs and partying. According to Brophy, there's no suggestion in the magazine that teenagers should completely remove themselves from pop culture and mainstream society, but at the same time, there is an expectation of constant vigilance about how you engage with those things and about what you're consuming and how you're consuming it. Our final story from the day, I want to start out by reading a piece of scripture, actually, from the book of Jeremiah, which says this. It says, "In the 9th year of Zedekiah, king of Judah, in the 10th month, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, marched against Jerusalem with his whole army and laid siege to it. The Babylonians set fire to the royal palace and the houses of the people and broke down the walls of Jerusalem." That's Jeremiah chapter 39, verses 1 and 8. Well, it looks like we can now add this to the already long list of biblical events that have archaeological confirmation. Archaeologists have been conducting excavations on the eastern slope of the city of David, and they discovered the remains of 2,500-year-old dwelling places that were recovered by a rock slide. They uncovered dozens of jugs in the excavation, some of which had seals stamped onto them. The reason these are important, these seals actually were used at the end of the first temple period and were used for an administrative system that developed shortly prior to the Babylonian invasion. Now, why is that important? Because it helps archaeologists now date the houses. How old are these houses? You can look at the seals. You know when these seals were used. That tells you, okay, if they were located in these houses, that must be how old this house is. And that puts it to right around the time of this passage from Jeremiah. Well, what was also found in that find? Charred wood, which tends to confirm the passage from Jeremiah of the burning of Jerusalem's houses. So yeah, we have another example of something that archaeology has yet confirmed, a story from the Bible. So those are our three current event stories for the day. How much they actually interest today's American teenager, I don't know. We'll find out. But let's throw things over here to Rachel for a minute and tell me what stood out to you in those three stories.
I liked the third story. I think it's funny when the Bible will say that something happened, and then eventually science catches up and find some evidence that proves it's right when we know all along that it was right because of the Bible.
You know, it's funny. I'm gonna butcher it because I don't remember who gave the quote now, so I'll figure it out afterwards. But there was a quote when from some cosmologist, and he was talking about the Big Bang, and it went something along the lines of, the scientists, looked through the cosmos, discovered all the mysteries of the cosmos, and finally got to the Big Bang, or the fact that they finally concluded that there was a beginning to the universe, and they found the Christian theologian standing there the whole time. So yeah,
I find it very ironic that it's science that is giving so much of this proof, because it's often science that lots of scientists reject Christianity because it doesn't, well, they say it doesn't support science at all, and it really does. It's baffling how many scientists still reject Christianity, even with all this proof that they have literally right in front of them.
Right in front of them. I mean, the Bible tells us, if God created the cosmos and He created the universe, and then we're going to be able to look at those things, and they should bear His signature. And lo and behold, they do. So, anything else you wanted to comment on, Sarah, or was that your thought as well?
The first one, I'm a movie geek, so the first one.
44 acting credits, that'll do it, right?
Yay, 44, that's my lucky number. The movie, I'm really curious to see how it turns out, because it obviously has this Christian character in it, and what I have to wonder is, which couple is he going to be a part of, and are they going to accurately represent how he would handle certain things with his faith?
Some, I think, do better than others at depicting real life and real life struggles. I find that some, especially when they try to depict non-Christian characters, don't do as good of a job. Whereas some others really do a very good job of really accurately showing what the struggles we really do go through and people really do go through in real life. And this one apparently is trying to depict what the struggles people go through at the high school age. So given that, hey, why don't we start talking about the struggles that people go through at the high school age? What do you see? See that transition? That was pretty good, wasn't it? Yeah? Okay. All right, let's move on to our topic of the week. Thank you very much. So our topic of the week this week is, what is it like to be a Christian in high school? There's an article I read getting ready for this week. It was called "Why Being a Teenage Christian is So Difficult" by Bree Hamilton. And it talked about the fact that many American teenage Christians today have lived, she said, we've lived our whole lives believing in God. And we've been sheltered under our Jesus bubble that has not yet revealed the truth behind what society has to say about Christianity. On the other hand, those who decided to follow Jesus in their later years has seen the reality behind their decision in a separate understanding, because many have been ridiculed for their choice. And I think the point that she was trying to make here is, people come to Christ at different times throughout their life. Some people are raised in the church, some people are not. And if somebody, let's say, who was not raised in the church and didn't become a Christian until their 30s or 40s, well, they've already kind of seen the way the world sometimes treats Christians, whereas it's a very different experience maybe for someone who has grown up in the church and has been a Christian as long as they can remember. So at some point, they have to come to the realization that not everybody feels that way, that the world is a place full of variety, and not always complementary. Some people out there not only are not, obviously there's a lot of people that aren't Christians, but there are some people that are very much anti-Christian out there. And so let me start over here with Sarah and ask you if you can think of any particular times, instances where you kind of had to come to the realization that, hey, you know what, not everybody thinks like me.
I'd just like to start off by saying I am baffled at what some of my classmates do. A lot of people say that their changes happen in high school, and I have to say one of my first realizations of this was in 6th grade. I was in social studies, because back then it was just social studies. There wasn't like American history or government or anything like that. It was just social studies. So we were learning about different kinds of religions, for social studies purposes. And I had already gone through, because what they had set up, my teacher, Mr. Wando, he's great.
Plug for Mr. Wando. There you go.
He had a bunch of papers hung up around the wall, so it was sort of like a rotation system, and each one was about different religions. And I had already finished my rotation, and you answered some questions about it, you read it, made sure you filled out the paper. I had already finished my rotation. I was sitting back down, and I remember watching a group of 2 boys come up to the Christian one and start reading it, and they started laughing because they thought it was stupid.
Is that the first time that you actually kind of saw that kind of reaction to your faith?
Yes, it was the first time, though I have had one other time that I have to say was completely baffling, and it was this year, too. Well, not technically this year. It was back in 9th grade.
Oh, those many months ago.
Many years ago, yes. My chorus does a lot of songs, and, you know, we do a lot of those proper songs and singing for chorus because it helps emphasize your range in voices and group work together.
And I should emphasize as you go through the story that you go to a public school.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, sorry.
So a lot of the songs have Christian undertones. Now they're usually in different languages to not upset anyone because, you know, it's a public school. But I think it was the Christmas concert. Two of my, I wouldn't say friends, but they were not Christian. They were at least well-known acquaintances of mine. And the word God was used in a celebratory way a few times in the song, and they blatantly refused to say it.
Yeah, I can understand, and some people may say this is a double standard that I'm applying here, but I can understand when you are a Christian and someone asks you to say something particularly egregious that could be, you know, cross the line to blasphemy. At least from the Christian perspective, there is a real person, I believe, out there that I'm offending when I say that. From an atheist perspective, I got to wonder, what's the big deal? If you don't think there's a God, who are you offending? I mean, it doesn't make sense, you know, so just say it. You know, it doesn't, you might not believe it, but I don't see where, it seems like the potential for offense and, you know, is on the Christian side, not the atheist side, and yet that's not necessarily what we see in society today as far as who's telling who to stop doing stuff. So let me turn things over here to Rachel and ask you, growing up, when did you first kind of start to realize that, you know, the world isn't all full of people? And I got to say, Rachel's got a lovely family. I didn't mention this. If you didn't catch by the last name, her father was on an episode, the 4th episode we had here. So you can go back on YouTube and watch that. And so there's a reason I asked her to be on the show today, because their family is a brilliant example in my mind of, now I don't know what happens behind closed doors. You may have some stories about your parents and your big sister that, you know, you can tell me afterwards, but great example of a strong Christian family. But at some point you must have come to the realization that not everybody is like that. So do you remember when that happened?
Well, I was homeschooled even before I was going to a Christian school. And I grew up in the church, and like you said, my family's Christian, so I never really interacted with that many people who weren't. Growing up, I was always with Christians. And then just as I've been getting older and interacting with more different types of people who believe different things, you can realize that people don't believe the same things you do. I remember I was talking to a girl, and I think I was telling her about like my week, and I was mentioning all the stuff at church we had, have like a different activity at church every day, and she just got like really mad about it and didn't understand why I would choose to do so much stuff at church. And that was kind of the first time I realized that not everybody did the same things and had that much, were involved that much in church.
I think more so nowadays for your generation than for mine, you're having to deal with not just disagreement, but almost an open hostility towards Christianity that's out there. And this is the age group where I think you really start dealing with it. So, good, thank you. Well, let's go into that a little bit. I want to read another quote from that article by Bree Hamilton. And what she said was, whether you have known God your whole life or only recently met him, the society that we live in today does not accept Christians with open arms and an ear wanting to hear what we have to offer. We are oftentimes ostracized, and it makes it incredibly difficult to build relationships with those who do not share our same views. We are entering into adulthood being told that sex, drugs, and money are what is going to ultimately make us happy and successful. Spoiler alert, no they won't. And even though we know differently, it has defined the reasoning behind a lot of the criticism received on a day-to-day basis. So we're told in the Great Commission we got to take the gospel to the world. So obviously we can't insulate ourselves. We have to somehow get out into the world in order to do that, which means we're going to be in amongst people who don't necessarily believe the same things we do. You're going to cut me off.
I think you meant isolate. We can't isolate ourselves.
What did I say?
You said insulate.
We can't insulate ourselves either, because that would be very scratchy. You wrap yourself up in that foam stuff, whatever. No, but you're right. We can't isolate ourselves either. Sorry. Getting back to my question, so we can't isolate ourselves from the world. We have to get out into it in order to spread the gospel to it. So let me ask you, Rachel, what kind of habits, practices, whatever, would you recommend that people get into in order to help guard their hearts, to prepare them to go out into that kind of world?
Mm-hmm. Well, you do have to go out to people that believe different things than you, but it's still important to have your close friends have the same beliefs so that they're the people that are influencing you. And as you go out to people who might not be a good influence, it's still good to have people who can hold you accountable and to have friends who believe the same things you do to help keep you accountable when you go out and see other people.
And that's an interesting point, because it's good. I'm glad to hear that you're coming to that realization here at this age, because that's advice that we even give to adults out there in the world. It's like, get news for you. You can grow up. The world's not going to change. It's still going to be like that. And an accountability partner of some sort. You've got to have close friends that are willing to do that and understand they're doing that out of love. That when you step afoul, they're going to say, no, you've screwed up. You've gotten off the path. You need to kind of steer yourself back in the way Christ is directing you to. So, Sarah, let me ask you then. When you go out and you're, just like we did last week, we had one guest who was from a private school, a private Christian school, one that was a public school. We try to balance out again the same way this week. Sarah, you go to a public school, so you're obviously exposed to a lot more people, I would assume. You can correct me when I'm wrong when I come back to you, but I'm guessing that most people in your school tend to be Christian, or at least say they are. Maybe we'll talk about that in a little bit too. But from your perspective, public school is a lot more people than aren't. So what do you recommend to people as far as how to guard their heart when they go into that kind of environment?
It's very important to remember that if you're going to go out and try to get other people to listen to you, at least when you're trying to spread the word, to remember that going full out and ignoring the fact that they have their own beliefs too is not the way to go about it, because that's more likely to get them extremely angry at you. I was in one of my classes and we had some extra free time, and I've told you this story. It was in my beginner piano class, and I was practicing on the piano, and behind me, because I sit in, there's like this special little keyboard piano, and when I walked in the first day, the teacher was like, I wonder who's going to pick that one. And I was like, well, now I have to pick that one now. So I did. She's
the one that sympathizes with the little pathetic tree on the Charlie Brown cartoon. You see the little tree that's falling over, that's the one we got to bring home. So
exactly. And so I had a couple people on the wall, because mine was in a corner in the wall on that side, and then there was another one that was their friend that was next to me, and then another girl a few pianos down, and they were having a conversation about abortion. And now they did have opposing sides, despite I don't believe any of them really being completely, like, totally Christian. And somehow, I don't remember how it got to this, but we got to talking about the beginning of the world and how the world was created. And we had just finished watching recently the movie God Is Not Dead. And I remember the arguments for the beginning of the world from that, and I was amazed by how it was all just put in front of me, and I was like, how could anyone not believe this? Mm-hmm. And so I started telling them about that, and I was not forcefully pushing it on them, and I was surprised by how accepting they were of it, and how willing they were to listen to me. And I felt very blessed in that moment to have, even though I'm in a public school filled with people who probably don't believe the same things I do, not just religion-wise, like on a normal day-to-day basis, to have people that were still willing to listen.
Any public school students that are out there need to understand this point from the story she's taken, is that you have the absolute right to engage in religious conversation at the school. The people talk about separation of church and state. That does not prevent you from engaging in a conversation like Sarah's described here. And there was another point that I was going to make, but I forgot what it was, so we'll just let it go with that. You did mention something there, Sarah, about these people maybe not. I can't remember how you phrased it, but maybe not all out Christians or something like that. And that kind of leads me into the next question I wanted to ask you, ladies. And this was a study. I don't know if she performed the study or was just commenting on it, but Kenda Creasy Dean, she's a minister and a professor at Princeton Theological Seminary. And she was talking about a study from the called the National Study of Youth and Religion that included in-depth interviews of about 3,300 American teenagers that were all between the ages of 13 and 15. So you guys are right in the middle of that age group. And that study found that most American teens who called themselves Christian were actually quite indifferent and inarticulate about their faith. They interviewed Christians of all stripes, from Catholics to Protestants, conservative, liberal denominations, all across the board. And even though 3 out of 4 American teenagers that they interviewed claimed to be Christian, fewer than half of them actually did anything to practice their faith at all. Only half even deemed it to be important. And most importantly, most of them couldn't even talk coherently about their beliefs. So they were saying they're Christian, but if you asked them anything more in-depth and detailed questions about that, they couldn't do it. They couldn't articulate it. So, Rachel, let me ask you, first of all, you attend a Christian school, so I don't know if you have the opportunity to see. Maybe you do, and you can certainly let me know if you do. But I'm more interested from your perspective of what types of things would you recommend to people to make sure that they don't fall into that trap? I mean, the mind, the heart, the mind's a muscle, they say, and that if you don't continue to use it, then it's going to shrivel up on you. And so a lot of us, we may be growing up, for our elementary and middle school, we're going to church, we're going to youth group, we're doing everything. And then we start to think, hey, I'm golden. As a matter of fact, Nikki Brown, who was on the show last week, talked a little bit about complacency. And she goes to a Christian college, and she says one of the biggest risks they have there is complacency, where people think, oh, you know what, because of these classes, these Bible classes I have to take, I'm good, I'm golden, I don't have to do anything else. But I think if you fall into that complacency, then you can slowly, even if you were very strong and you knew your faith, when you were younger, you can start to lose it and slip out of that if you're not diligent about it. So what would you say to someone as far as how to make sure that they don't become that type of person who claims to be Christian because they've always gone to church since they were a kid, but then eventually kind of forgets everything and can't say the first thing about what the gospel is even about?
Mm-hmm. Well, you do see a lot of that. People claim to be Christians and they go to church with their families, but they don't really take it seriously themselves. And if you have a Bible class, then you don't feel the need to do anything extra. So just to realize that you can always do more, and we're not perfect, and we just have to realize that we're all sinners and we still need God, even though we have a Bible class or whatever. We have the Christian aspect of school. You still need to take it farther and to do things by yourself, not just in a school setting, to grow in your faith.
Let me ask you, outside of the school setting, right, what types of things do you do? Either things here at the church or maybe at home with your family or with your friends. What other types of things do you do to make sure that God's playing a role in your life when you're not at school?
Well, we're involved in church here, the music and going to church and youth group and all that, and having a group of believers that can encourage you and be there for you, and just at home staying in the Word, reading your Bible and praying and doing that is.
So, all right, last thing I want to talk about is the Bible talks about, by John 13:35, by this everyone will know that you're my disciples if you love one another. So we're supposed to show the love of Christ to the world. In the high school environment, Sarah, just in a minute or two, to the people that are watching out there, what would you tell them are ways that a high school student can show the love of Christ on a day-to-day basis?
If you have an opportunity to share something with someone, do it. Take the opportunity, because if you let it pass by, you could have changed someone's life for all you know after that conversation if you had taken it.
Rachel, let me ask you then, what kind of closing advice would you give to people? How can people show the love of Christ in the world in a high school environment?
I think the most important thing is through your actions, because just showing them the love of Christ through what you do, and then they might ask, why do you have such a good, why are you so positive? And you can say that's because of Jesus, and that's why you do these things. If you don't, so you're not preaching at people, just through your actions you can show the love of Christ.
Always look for an opportunity to show someone love. They're out there every single day. You look like you want to say something else.
I don't know if you were told, but I wasn't told we were going to have to make speeches at the end of this.
I knew you could do it. So, well, she said she didn't know we were going to make a speech at the end of this, which means that's my cue to sign off and say this is the end of this. So, thank you very much for joining us here for this episode of Trinity Talk Live. I certainly hope that we were able to give you some advice out there, especially for those of you that are either parents of high schoolers or high schoolers yourself. It's not going to be easy out there in the world today. We know that. Hopefully we've given you something here today that can help build you up and help you face the world out there boldly and lovingly. So if you did like this video, do me a favor. If you could go ahead and please click the like button. That's a thumbs up button right here on the YouTube channel. Comment on it as well. Share it. Those things all help more people get to actually see this video. Also, go ahead and subscribe to our channel. The channel here, the Trinity Joppa channel. We got a lot more on here than just Trinity Talk Live. Please feel free to explore. Subscribe to it. You'll be able to get notifications of when we post something new and keep up to date on everything we have to offer. Trinity Talk Live does have its own Facebook page. We are at Trinity Talk Live Podcast. If you could, please go on to Facebook. If you're on Facebook and like that page, you can use that to comment on our posts, to send us messages, whatever it may be, with ideas for future episodes. You can do that on the YouTube channel as well. As a matter of fact, just somebody commented on our episode, I think it was from last week, with a suggestion of a future episode that they would like to see, and I think we might be trying to work that one out. So we're going to be back next Tuesday at noon. Our topic for next week is going to be the last one in our 4-week series on families and back to school. Next week it's going to be what can we do about cyberbullying, a new phenomenon that a lot of us in my generation didn't have to deal with growing up, but kids today certainly do. So again, thank you very much for joining us here today at Trinity Talk Live. Thank you to my guests, Sarah Coughlan, Rachel Derwart. I think they were brilliant. They were nervous, but they were brilliant. So it's over now. You can breathe a big sigh of relief, all right? And thank you all for tuning in. God bless.
In your word we will follow.